Hey guys, welcome to something completely different. I have here with me Hugh Jeremy, who is like a PR person for the Natural Selection 2 team, which is a game coming up in October. How are you doing, Hugh?
G'day, I'm pretty good. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. This is actually our second take for the beginning of the interview. You're going to notice an annoying cut because I'm going to keep most of the interview, but I lost part of the footage, so I'm going to make it as pretty as I can, so I apologize for that. So, Hugh, the first thing I'd like to ask you is, for people who are not familiar with the Natural Selection franchise at all, what makes this sort of stand out among games today?
Sure, it's Natural Selection 2 is very unique. That's a fact, and the hint comes from the fact that it's a real-time strategy game plus first-person shooter game. What does that mean? Well, it means, imagine you're playing a game of StarCraft or Command and Conquer or something like that. You're looking down on a battlefield, you're moving units around, you are placing structures, researching technology, collecting resources. In Natural Selection 2, all of that is happening. There is a real-time strategy game there, but the crucial difference between us and a lot of other games is that all the people on the ground, all the units running around on the ground, are real people playing the game with that real-time strategy player in first person. So it seamlessly combines the two genres to create a very unique gameplay experience. We've got two completely asymmetrical sides, an alien side and a marine side, both of those with a real-time strategy commander looking down on the battlefield, giving orders, researching technology, placing structures, choosing strategies, choosing attacks, choosing defenses, collecting resources, all of that you'd expect from a real-time strategy, but with all those players playing the first-person game as all the units.
Yeah, and it works even better than it sounds like it would, in my opinion. It's a very impressive thing they've pulled off here. It sounds kind of overly complicated, maybe, but that's not how I would describe it. It's very elegantly pulled off.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I guess I'm going to cut the footage here, and hopefully it's not too jarring. Thanks. Alright, this is very near the beginning of a question. To give a little context here, he's talking about how the graphics for Natural Selection 2 are much, much better than you would expect for such a small team, which has been, I believe it started with 4 people, and then it went up to, they have about 16 people total working on the project, but not all of them are developers right now. And for such a small project, the game looks really good, so I was asking Hugh, why that is, and whether that was something they had planned on from the beginning.
Wow.
Yeah, so, and part of the Natural Selection experience was deemed to be an immersive graphical environment in which you can feel the thrills and spills and scares of being amongst these aliens or be amongst these marines in combat. So from the start, the idea was to make an amazing indie game, and the fact that there are graphics that we're very proud of that go along with that doesn't make us any less indie. It's just a point of pride. It's on our own engine called Spark, and it's very, very exciting, and we're so proud of the fact that we do have those graphics to go along with what we hope is really exciting gameplay.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I wasn't meaning to knock indie games. I was just saying that for an indie game, this game looks pretty goddamn good.
Thank you.
And I was just, yeah, it's surprising to me that like 4 people would set out and go like, we're gonna make a game that looks like a AAA game with gameplay that's more complicated than a AAA game. And
Why not, eh? Why not?
Sure.
Sky's the limit, and if there's limits on something, and if there's an accepted practice, why not try something different and see what gamers out there decide about it? And yeah, that's what we're going to find out this October. I mean, now.
Right. Yeah. Do you guys have an idea of the release date at this point? Probably late October?
Great discussion yesterday about that. It will be in October. There's no doubt about it, barring some unforeseen disaster. But no, we just don't honestly know yet. We're coming very close, though. I mean, the announcement will be very, very soon, and there'll be a very short lead time between the announcement and the actual date. It's not going to be a case of, hey, here's the date. It's 3 months in the future. It's kind of like, hey, we're releasing.
Right now.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very fast and very, very sharp, and it's definitely happening this October again, bar some sort of disaster.
Right. Speaking of which, the beta, as far as I can tell, is very complete. There's just like minor balance changes that are being done at this point. Are you guys basically in the home stretch, like development-wise, or how do you see the full version differing from the beta as it is now?
Oh, that's a really great question. Right now, the beta is what we call feature complete, which means that there aren't any major features going in the builds that we're still doing on a weekly, sort of bi-monthly basis. So there's That said, there's, as you say, there's balance. There's minor balance tweaks going, and we're pretty confident about the balance now. There's a lot of stat tracking done on the balance, and we know that it's coming close to 50-50, and
Sure.
it's just bouncing around that. Performance improvements are a big focus, but also usability, making sure the game is accessible to new players. That's the
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of that lately.
yeah, there's been a lot of things like the rookie mode that's gone in.
Sure.
The tutorial system has started to go in. The explore mode system is in. There's a lot of stuff going in, a lot of improvements to tooltips and user interfaces. So that's the big focus right now. The gameplay will not differ significantly between now, the beta, and what we see in version 1 in this October, in a few weeks. But what's exciting is that's not the full version of the game. That's not the final version of the game. This is why I'm so excited about your question, because the release of Natural Selection 2, the end of beta for Natural Selection 2, the version 1 gold release, does not mark the end of development. It marks just a milestone in development. There's so many things on whiteboards around the office, so many features that we want to put into the game, so many exciting additions, ways to make the game better that won't make it in for this release, but you can bet we'll be cranking on the day after this goes out.
Excellent. So is this going to be DLC or?
Well, it will be DLC in the sense that it is downloaded via Steam.
Oh, but like
in
paid
the sense that you're
DLC.
gonna be paying for it. So, I mean, obviously, maybe in like 6 months, maybe there's a huge new change to NS2 that we've been working on for ages, and maybe that's a $5-10 DLC. Who knows? We don't want to limit ourselves there,
Sure.
But importantly, things like maps, extra abilities, units, substantial big changes to the game that add a lot to the game. We're not going to be charging for those over the next months and hopefully years of supporting Natural Selection 2. We don't want this game to get out there and be just a flash in the pan. Hey, it's released. Okay, we played it. It was fun. We want to support it very, very long term, like Valve does with TF2. We look at them for inspiration in that regard.
Oh, okay, that's great. Yeah. So long-term support for. I'm sorry.
I'll just add to that really quickly. There's not only there's an entire map I know that's well in development that won't be released at release, that'll be coming sometime after for free. There's also an entire art set, and what I mean by that is each map is based on an individual art set, and you could have 3 or 4 maps done on an art set. For example, there's a mining art set, which Mineshaft is based on. Now there's an entire art set called the Biodome set that we haven't used for any maps yet.
Oh, man.
So that's really exciting because we're going to be able to put out so many new maps post-release based on that. So I really mean it when I say there's a lot of content coming.
That is cool. So about the balance, you mentioned earlier that you were working on trying to get the teams 50-50. As far as so I'm trying to find the question I'm thinking of. A big issue with any asymmetrical multiplayer game like this is always making sure that like the different factions that you can play as are as balanced, and the more different those factions get, the more difficult that gets. And it's really easy to get into the situation where everybody plays on one team and doesn't want to play the other team. What has the process been like for trying to achieve a balance, which I think you have very well in Natural Selection too?
Well, lots and lots of iteration, lots and lots of feedback, and lots of stats. It's a really tricky process. You're right. A lot of games will choose to go with 2 symmetrical sides to ease this kind of balancing because it is a serious issue, and a vast amount of Charlie's time is taken up trying to balance the game, because having 2 completely asymmetrical sides like these is definitely, it's asking for trouble, but it's also asking for really exciting gameplay where there's no hard counters. There's no set counters. Everything's kind of fluid, and there's exciting play. Trying to, what happens if the aliens rush fades? Well, you don't rush your own fades. You've got to come up with a combination of armor and shotguns maybe to deal with that. That's exciting, and to do that, you need to have a lot of games played. So, for example, StarCraft had a huge QA team testing StarCraft 2 to make sure that. And they had the public beta as well, where they were collecting balance stats. So they had a huge amount of games played before release that they could draw on to make sure the game was balanced. It's the same with us. We have thousands and thousands of games played each build. We've had upwards of 70 builds now in the alpha and beta. We've got 45,000 people plus playing the beta. So it's a huge amount of stats we can collect, and just iterating gently in each build. Okay, let's bump this stat just a little bit. let's change the way the Onos works just a little bit. Let's see where that goes and watch what happens. And again, very, very slowly and carefully and iteratively build up that 50-50 balance.
Sure. Yeah, it's I'm sure that must be a huge. I couldn't even begin to imagine how to decide how to balance something like that.
It's tricky. It's
Yeah.
real.
And another really unique thing about natural selection, as far as I'm aware, natural selection is the only game that has different players playing different types of play. You've got people playing a first-person shooter on the ground, and then on top of them, you've got the commanders who are commanding those players and playing an RTS at the same time, building structures and commanding their units, which are other players. What's it like trying to balance the experiences of those so that neither experience is tacked on or frustrating?
Yeah, that's a really, really important question to ask, and it is tricky. And the first thing I'll say is there have been some other games that have tried this in the past. Obviously, the original Natural Selection back in 2002, the Savage games, also more recently Nuclear Dawn. And you're right, it is a very tricky thing to do. We're not saying we're better or we're definitely not saying we're worse than any of those, but we'd like to think we've done it fairly well, and we've come at it from the perspective of we don't want to frustrate either set of players. We don't want them to feel like they're helpless without the other. Obviously, you need both a commander and players on the ground to play out a game of natural selection, but crucially, we've divided the responsibilities of players and commanders into appropriate zones, and you can sort of neatly think about it as if the commander has strategic control, but individual players have tactical control. And what does that mean? It means, okay, maybe the commander wants to go a defensive path. Maybe they want to play a bit defensively at the start of a game, and they're the alien commander. Well, they could choose to go a crag hive, which is a defensive evolution path for that hive, and start evolving defensive abilities for players. However, it is up to the individual players to choose when and how they actually use those abilities. Players themselves have to evolve a defensive carapace, for example, for more armor, based on that commander's strategic choice. Also on the Marine side, maybe you want to increase your initial firepower, so you decide to research shotguns for your team. It's up to individual players to actually buy those shotguns and use them, and that's their choice when they do that. So players do have freedom within their respective tactical and strategic spheres to make choices and play the game out. But definitely neither is tacked on. You'll probably know from playing it, and anyone that's listening will see it very rapidly if they choose to play it. The commanding role is a fully fleshed out real-time strategy game. It's not just a switchboard of clicking and moving things and placing the occasional structure. It exhibits all the characteristics of a real-time strategy game. The key difference being, of course, that the units on the ground actually are real people and don't just move when you tell them to. You actually have to engage with them as humans. So, and of course, the first-person shooter isn't tacked on either. I mean, it'd be blindingly obvious if it was.
Oh,
if you
yeah,
were just, I don't know, shooting at walls. Or I don't even know how you could tack on first.
Well,
person.
it would feel a little bit worse if, like, you were beholden to your commander for giving you all of your equipment and everything like that. I think it's a good strategy letting them take their own stuff and go where they want to go. I think.
Yeah, you're right. And the original NS. For all its amazing strengths, one of the key frustrations for a lot of players was that they were dependent on that commander to give their equipment. So that's one of the big changes we've made. The commander still controls what equipment is available, but individual players get to choose what they buy, when, what they use, and how they want to play the game. Maybe you're better with a rifle than a shotgun anyway. I know I am.
Yeah, exactly.
So I often default to the rifle anyway and save for more advanced weapons. Or maybe just buy my teammate a shotgun and then go with my own rifle, because you can pass the weapons off, you could drop them on the floor and another player can pick them up. So you do have freedom to choose how you're going to play the game. And it's very much about teamwork, of course, and that's rooted throughout the game, but we do give players freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've noticed that. It impresses me a lot how...
Where's all the eggs?
Yeah, you really do feel like you're still playing a game. You don't have to be dependent on your commander. He just sort of gives you ideas of what sort of strategies you should be doing, and gives you the tools for that. So, speaking of the original natural selection, as I understand it, that game, or that mod, I should say, had a really entrenched fan base that you guys are obviously now trying to draw into natural selection too. How has it been trying to balance, like, them wanting a natural selection clone, maybe, with trying to innovate and making natural selection a new game, and just trying not to make like old fans storm your offices and kill you all.
You joke. Look, it's a real issue. The exciting thing is that if you want to play a natural selection remake, you can. Because the Spark engine is so incredibly moddable.
Oh yeah.
People have already gone out and started to make, and it's very well advanced now, a natural selection clone on the Spark engine that plays just like natural selection did, with all the same features but with updated graphics.
Well, there you go.
And the updated engine. So it's very much there, but we do have a lot of a very vocal element of the community that will usually default to arguing for Natural Selection 1 mechanics, which is difficult because Natural Selection 1 wasn't a perfect game. Natural Selection 2 won't be either. We want them to be different games. Ideally, we want Natural Selection 2 to be a better game. Of course, that's going to be up to the wide player base to decide that. It is tricky because people will default. Whenever there's a problem with the game, often there's a very vocal group of people that will very much push for, well, why don't you just take it back to the way Natural Selection was? So the answer is that you can play the original Natural Selection if you want, and to do that would be just the easy way out. And we're trying to create a new game here, not a clone. And so going that route is just not an option. Obviously, the new game draws on the old game in huge swaths of its gameplay in lots of areas. But in key areas, such as, for example, buying your own weapons or having an alien commander, the second game is really improving on some of the weaknesses of Natural Selection 1, as few as we'd like to think there were.
Right.
Oh, and I should add to that, I mean, with that player base out there that was so passionate for Natural Selection 1, they absolutely form the core of what is making Natural Selection 2 great. A lot of the old competitive players from NS1 have jumped into the NS2 competitive scene and are really driving that, organizing that, and just creating amazing play. And also, because they've been in the NS universe for so long, for 10 years or more, because they could have been in pre-release builds of Natural Selection, they've got, a lot of them have a really good sense of arguing for balance changes and arguing for changes to units that can improve the game. So it's hugely valuable. And of course, that group of people form the core of people who pre-ordered Natural Selection 2. And before I worked on the Unknown World, started working on the Unknown Worlds team, that's what I like to think I was. I was a huge fan of NS1 that got to pre-order NS2 and, of course, fund the development.
Right. So you mentioned modability. So this game is going to have extensive mod support. Is that going to be through like the Steam Workshop?
Oh my word, it's even more than that, and it's not even a case of it will, it's a case of it does already.
Right.
It's hugely moddable. The Spark engine, which is our custom engine that we've built from scratch. In fact, I should say Max, who's in the corner of the room right now, who basically built it himself. When he was creating in this engine, he wanted the engine to be able to allow a small team to iterate very quickly on very large games, and part of that is writing the game on top of the engine in a scripting language called Lua. And for the non-technical people out there, which includes me, Lua is basically a very easy language to write, and it means a small team can write a lot of game code very fast. It also means that all the game code is open source. So anyone can open up their Natural Selection 2 directory, look inside, find the game's source code, and tinker with it. The Spark engine actually treats Natural Selection 2 as a mod itself, and it is so ridiculously easy to start up your own mod. You could say, maybe you want a mod where there's no ONOS in the game. You could copy your Natural Selection 2 folder copy the NS2 directory inside your Natural Selection 2 folder, rename it no ONOS, go into the source code, remove the ONOS, and start up the game with a no ONOS tag, and bam, it's done. Now, of course, there is integration with Steam Workshop as well. All our tools that we use to develop the game are released with the game, so anyone that is in the beta right now and anyone that buys the game on Steam, anyone that gets the game any way they choose, already has all the development tools in the Natural Selection 2 directory. That includes scripting tools, mapping tools, animation tools, cinematic editor, which is a bit like Source Filmmaker, just not quite as cool. All of that is there, and it's not just the game is moddable. We've already had entire pieces of the game built by modders. The spectator system was built by modders and is now officially part of the game. There are entire maps such as Summit and Vale, which started as community efforts and are now officially part of the game. There are heaps of maps out there that are almost finished, that will be ready for release, that are community maps, and no doubt there'll be many more. And there's a huge amount of mods. Like I said, there's the Natural Selection 1 mod, there's the Combat mod, there's a cool mod where people are replacing Infestation with Pitch Darkness, and it's creating this super creepy atmosphere. So there's just so many mods. And the game is a blank canvas for anyone to get in there and make whatever game they want.
That is so cool. Yeah, I feel like there are a lot of, especially AAA games are falling victim to this. They decide not to support mods for whatever reason. And I feel like that's a huge mistake, because modding just vastly improves the value of a game over time, I feel. So that's great.
Yeah, well, it's modding is... Look at where natural selection came from. That was a mod.
Yeah.
Look at where LoL and Dota 2 and League of Legends and Smite and all these games have come from. They came from Dota, which was a mod. Modding is massive. I mean, you could even say that Battlefield 2 drew a lot from Desert Combat, which was a mod.
Sure,
so
yeah.
There's so many games out there.
Yeah, and since Battlefield has stopped supporting mods.
I know.
Which is terrible.
But yeah, I mean, to each their own, and there's some games that have, they're still creating amazing experiences without it. But we would like to think that we're not the best game developers in the world, and that there are people out there who would love to play with this system and create their own games, and we hope they do.
Yeah, sounds like a great community to be a part of, both if you are a modder and just if you like playing games, because mods, they make a game so much better. Well, anyway, I think I've kept you long enough. Thank you so much for talking to me, Hugh Jeremy.
Thank you for taking the time and being interested in natural selection. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, to my viewers, get on Steam, pre-order the game. It's really fun, and it's coming out sometime later this October. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.